A true freshman could start on the offensive line for Washington.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just a quick reminder to everybody out there, wherever you're getting this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure you click that subscribe, that follow button down below. Make sure you click that little bell too, so you never miss when we post a new show, new video, anything like that. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review. All that stuff really does help us out a lot, as does a like on the video, because we got so much more fun stuff coming from spring practice. Lars, we're just getting back from Washington's 4th spring practice. Whole lot of good stuff, whole lot of big plays and turnovers on Tuesday. We'll get to all of that. Rashawn Clark, Jordan Washington were two guys that just continued to stand out. A couple of 4-star recruits from Jedd Fisch's 2024 class. But Lars, we talked to Jedd after practice. One of the first things he said was, hey, there are 5 guys in the mix right now at right guard. Paki Finau has mainly been playing left, played a little bit on the right side today. Talked about Zach Henning, Geirean Hatchett, and a pair of true freshmen in John Mills and Taulealea that could end up starting there.
Yeah, obviously the latter, not necessarily as much of a surprise, because with Champ, just you and I have been on the train from day one. Like, if we even before these guys got on campus, we said if you had to pick one of these offensive linemen who were going to play more than 4 or at least burn their red shirt, it was going to be Champ. But the second we saw John Mills get on campus, it was like, oh, okay, we might need to make, if you could only have 2. And I think you just look at that and say, because, I mean, the interesting thing for me was Champ has been the unquestioned one since day one. Like, first day of camp, he was getting in those reps, while at the same time, John Mills was kind of working on some, like, things, not up to the side, I want to say, but kind of like almost like mirroring his reps, but not actually getting the rep itself. The fact that now John is already on day 5, put himself into that category, I think shows and it addresses why the coaching staff didn't go out and get another veteran guard in the portal, like I kept throwing out on Twitter. And I was like, hey, here's another one. Hey, this guy's got 1,500 snaps, 2 sacks. Like, hey, you guys want him? Like, he's there. And I think the coaching staff was like, you know what? I think we know what we got. And now, again, it's worth noting, for freshman offensive linemen, it is a very big feat to start or even play. Like, that is just body type, all those sorts of things. And both Champ and John Mills have solid body types, so they actually could play as freshmen. So they check the box in that regard. But the fact that they're able to pick up the scheme, pick up things like that, pick up the install, I want to see where they are at the end of fall camp. But the fact that Jedd's already high on them early on says, like, hey, like, I think fair to say they're going to both burn their red shirt this fall.
So I'm with you right now on that front, because it is a heavy rotation, right? And as soon as Jedd said that, he said, as he does often, it's something we did at Arizona with Jonas Avenaya, with Wendell Moy, where those were other guys who filled in that role, and Jonah was a freshman All-American. And that's something that, you look at, and hey, if they do play in every game, you and I are not going to be shocked by that. Where one of the offensive line combinations that happened today was that we saw today running with Damon Williams is really, really interesting. We saw Carver Willis at left tackle. We saw John Mills at left guard, Landon Hatchett at center, Champ Taulealea at right guard, and then Drew Azzopardi at right tackle. Now, again, that was with Damon Williams, so technically those would be considered the first team reps, right? There's another defensive line combination in that same regard that I wanted to get to a little bit later on. But I'm just very intrigued by that, because when I look at Zach Henning and I look at Geirean Hatchett as the two, just veteran guys that are in that room, right? It's okay. Yeah, certainly understand. You and I have talked about Zach potentially winning that starting spot a lot, with Geirean Hatchett being in that mix as well, where both of them have also taken reps at center this spring. And it's really interesting, where the more I look at both John Mills and Champ Taulealea, I put Jack Schaefer in that conversation as well, as just a big physical dude. But I know he's coming off an injury he suffered in high school, so he might be a little farther behind in that regard. But it's exactly what you said. It's the, hey, not only, did they just forego getting another veteran in the transfer portal, but it is just the Jedd Fisch signature, the playing guys early and getting them into the rotation, because we know that having 7, 8, even 9 guys, if you're really comfortable with it, along the offensive line will go a long way. And last spring, you only had 9 guys practicing. So it's certainly a big step forward in that regard. And I've been impressed with Paki Finau so far this spring, and there's certainly a long way to go, right? We've seen the defensive line look really, really good. And overpowering at certain points in time, which, as we continue to just move throughout the spring, because again, it's only day 4. We're going to see, is that a little bit more on the offensive line, or is it just more on, hey, this defensive line is deep and strong and powerful, and we'll figure that out. But I look at John Mills and Champ Taulealea, the 2 guys that Jedd mentioned by name, and I say, all right, if I were, a fan that's sitting there and saying, I'm really uncomfortable with that and I want to see another guy brought in the spring, I would be willing to see this out, mainly because of the size and the physicality, because all the traits are there. And if you're comfortable with that guy playing in the Big Ten, what's the use, what's the harm in throwing him in 4 or 5 games at guard as part of a rotation and not even just as a starter?
And you hit the perfect segue right there. Rotation, where you're looking at it thinking, well, you have 5 starting offensive linemen. You're probably going to play 8 or 9. How do you keep the other 8 or 9, and let's conservatively say dozen guys involved in that mix from transferring? Because if you're an offensive lineman and it's, well, hey, if I'm not going to start here, like we saw Kelly Tafai, why would you transfer after just 1 season? Well, hey, I'm going to go start here because you guys are going to have a different starter here. So I have the ability to start. I should go find some place where I can play. Having that rotation and Jedd being able to say, look, like it's a competition. Like 1 week you might play 30 snaps, 1 week he might play 30. It's just, again, we're going to see how the week goes. And similar to when you touched on the defensive line, that's how you build that depth and rotation, where you figure out, like, whoever ends up starting and playing the most snaps, that's how you figure it out. You don't go into it and say, well, let's go get a guy from the portal, or let's go do this, or we're just going to say these are our 6 guys, or these are our 5 guys, and nobody else is going to get a decent amount of reps. That's how you end up losing a bunch of guys in the portal. So there's a fine line to balance between finding your 5, but also still in Jedd's kind of competition mantra of, well, we need about 8 or 9 anyways. Even if you do have all 5 guys healthy for the entire season, you would think once you put teams away, you're going to get Geirean in, you're going to get Paki in, you're going to get Zach in. Well, it depends on who's it, then you get the freshmen and John and Champ, where you think somehow that's how you factor in all these guys getting reps, is you're putting teams away early so these guys can get reps, or vice versa, where these young freshmen are the ones that are putting them away, and then you're getting other guys in the mix and you're finding in that rotation combination.
Yeah, I see. It's something for me that goes beyond blowouts, right? It goes beyond the first couple of weeks of the season, and even beyond the Washington State games, and that's still weird for that to be in the middle of September and be the third non-conference game. But it goes beyond that. It goes to, all right, are you throwing these guys in when you go to Michigan, when you go to Wisconsin, when you go on the road to Maryland, UCLA? I'm just naming all the road games, right? Because that's where these things just come even more in handy. But I look at it more in that regard, because if you're willing to just have these guys be that much of a part of the rotation, it's, who's to say that you can't A, let them win the job, and B, just play out a full game there, where, let's say you do that early on, right? Why don't you say, like, hey, Champ, you're starting the second game of the year, and then John Mills, we're letting you start the third game. I was going to say the fourth, but I know that's the Ohio State game, so I'm not going that far down the road there. But there are so many different ways that Jedd can find a way to make this work, and we're just throwing out all these different scenarios. So, because I see where you're going with that, and we're throwing out all these different scenarios because it's something we know that Jedd is certainly working through right now, where there are so many different opportunities that you have with I don't want to say a much deeper offensive line, a real offensive line, unlike what you had last spring. And it's just going to be a curious process to let's see through, because we could be sitting here in 2 weeks and it's, oh yeah, Zach Henning has entrenched himself as the starter, or Geirean Hatchett has entrenched himself as the starter. And we're still going to be having a conversation about these guys being a part of the rotation and potentially still playing in 11, 12, 13 games and burning their red shirts, because that's certainly what Jedd made it sound like is going to happen. But it's just going to be really interesting to see if they can just overtake these guys and start, because that's just certainly that you and I believe is something that fans should keep an eye on. And Lars, they also need to keep an eye on Rashawn Clark and Jordan Washington. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support, industry-leading service, service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5, 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. So, Lars, let's start with Rashawn Clark. This is now 2 straight practices where he's pulled in a one-handed interception, where today it's during the one-on-one period of practice where Damon Williams was looking for Marcus Harris, and he just turned around and reached back and stuck his arm up and just made a phenomenal play. And another thing Jedd mentioned after practice was the nickel battle between Dyson McCutcheon, Rashawn Clark being just, the 2 big guys there right now. And you and I have been talking all winter about Rashawn possibly winning that job. And again, we're only through 4 practices here, but he's doing a lot to just say, yeah, I'm going to run away with this job, at least in his opinion.
So this is, again, you got to listen to the context where I put this. I remember Rashawn shared a Travis Hunter post on Instagram a couple of months ago, back when he was getting, before the Heisman or around the time of the Heisman, and it was talking about going both ways, where I'm not saying Rashawn is in the Travis Hunter, is guaranteed Heisman next season. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he couldn't be either. I think it's the mentality where clearly he's coming as a guy, especially going into last season, where it's, hey, they brought me into Arizona. I was one of the guys. Somehow Washington was gonna let me escape, and I was gonna go play for John Richardson down in Arizona. And then he comes back to Washington. It's okay, cool. I actually get to do this at home. And just there's been something about his game where I think the way he approaches the game is so cerebral, where he plays like a veteran, where he's able to challenge guys like Dyson McCutcheon, other veterans who have been around 2-3 years in the program, but it's almost like they're the exact same player, just in terms of mental makeup and things like that. So I think that's why Rashawn has been able to kind of, I don't want to say separate himself really, but certainly make a name for himself, because last season it was going to be kind of hard as a true freshman. We thought he might get some chance, but I think now is okay, everybody got that foundational year. Everyone's favorite word, my favorite word, Jedd's favorite word, everyone's favorite word, foundational year. The fact that he's able to build on that so early on in spring camp kind of tells you, no matter if he's starting or not, he is certainly going to play a significant amount of snaps this season, and I don't think it's just a nickel either.
So I think it might end up being just in the nickel, where the reason I say that is I look at the safety rotation. Vincent Holmes also had a pick today, and I think that I look back there and I see Makell Esteen, who played really well and also had an interception today. That, like I said earlier, a lot of turnovers. There's Makell, there's CJ Christian, there's Paul Menke, there's Vincent Holmes, there's Alex McLaughlin, there's Ryland Dillard-Allen. There's so many guys at that position at the back end of the defense that you just it's not even, it's not even hey, we have to try Rashawn somewhere else. It's just an abundance of riches, where I feel like you're suggesting outside corner with this. But even as I look there, I look at Caleb Presley, he played really well today. Leroy Bryant is somebody they really like there behind, Takaria Davis and Ephesians Prysock. And it's somebody who was hanging around all last week. I look at Dylan Robinson and I say, is that somebody you're going to keep up the field this year? And again, I'm not saying any of this to knock Rashawn Clark. I think he's very, very talented. But I think if you can find him to the nickel, that might be the best position to utilize him right now and just get the most out of him. We saw him running some blitzes out of that slot today. We saw him just play really well in coverage, not just in one-on-ones, but in 7s, in 11s. And the more I look at him, the more I say, just putting him in that position is just most beneficial to this defense right now.
So I just let you finish all that, because that's not where I was going with that.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're talking about offense.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also kind of the pair with Jordan Washington, in the sense of, we talked about it. Giles mentioned it last season. You mentioned it on the show a couple of times. Hey, there might be a couple of packages. That's why I said, that's not the only position he's going to play. But I also don't think it's going to be he's not going to go both ways, a la Travis Hunter, where he's actually getting, 15 plus snaps on offense per game.
No, I think that's fair. The reason I didn't necessarily think of that is we haven't seen that yet this spring. So I was just because you're right. When we talked about that with Giles in November last year, I want to say it was, he was very quick to say, yeah, he's somebody who could play both sides of the ball. But that's something I want to see first. And I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just very curious to see how they might use that, because, before we get to Jordan Washington, where it's something where we've seen Chris Lawson make a name for himself. Raiden Weisbreit wasn't out there at practice today. Jedd said he'll probably end up being back on Thursday, so nothing to worry about there. Marcus Harris has gotten some run as well. That's along with Audric Harris. It's along with Kevin Green. So it's something where if we see him in the slot, there's just a lot of guys he has to overtake there for that to happen right now. Again, not that it won't happen. I'm just curious to see how that might pan out. But Lars, let's talk about Jordan Washington. There were so many points today where we just saw that elite speed show up, where we're talking with our buddies, Alex Katz and Nick Lemkow, Andy Yamashita, Christian Capel, everybody else. And we saw him rip off a 60-yard touchdown run because at Dempsey Indoor, where they practice today, it's an 80-yard field. Would have been an 80-yard touchdown run. That would have been a 300-yard touchdown run because he just has that kind of breakaway speed where he just gets to the line, gets the edge, and he is just gone. And I'm just so curious to see what he might look like because we talked to Jedd, we talked to Jonah Coleman. Jonah doesn't need to do a lot this spring. As he said, yeah, I'm antsy. I want to get out there, but I have to realize that I've earned this from working hard through my previous 3 years. And, it's about not getting me hurt, about a bunch of other things like that. And even Adam Muhammad, to an extent, what that guy is going to give you. So you're still giving him a decent workload. But today we saw Jordan Washington pick up a lot of that and do really, really well in the little pressure kick red zone drill stuff they were doing at the very end. We saw him start outside the red zone and just rip off another 35-yard run, gets pushed out of bounds at like the 2-3 yard line. It's just whenever he's on the field, it's that home run threat it's why we've seen Scotty Graham push for a guy like him in every single class. It's every time he touches the ball, there is a legitimate possibility that he's going to score.
And that's something you can't replicate, where you can try and emulate it. You can try and get different versions of it. But I think having that dynamic threat in addition to an Adam Muhammad, in addition to having those two-back sets where you have Damon and then Jonah on one side and Jordan on the other, Adam on one side and Jordan on the other, that's a different dynamic than, God forbid, you throw in Kevin Green or Audric in the slot. Like, there's a lot of speed packages that you can kind of get creative with real quick there. And you think about what does all that do? Well, it's creating different lanes, creating different matchups. One-on-one. Who do you have to account for? Where we saw that, and again, the easiest example is the Wazoo game, where you look at Will as the quarterback, you don't have to account for that gap. Damon's there, you do have to account for another gap. And I think it's not just the Damon factor in that, but then you go and playoff, you add a second back in that equation, or you split them out, where we've seen Jordan Washington, he's got decent hands. He's not incapable of catching the ball. So I think there's plenty of different things you can do in that light to where you're not just using him as a decoy 9 times out of 10.
So that's what I wanted to get to, because one of the things that Jonah talked about with us today was he spent a lot of time this season, this spring, learning more about the route tree and learning more about playing receiver. And I'm curious where that might come in for Jordan Washington for a lot of those reasons, where he's got that speed, that threat, that ability to, because we'll see Jonah, we saw it a couple times last season, where he starts in the backfield, just gets motioned out wide to the top, bottom formation, wherever it might be. And I think that's a really fun place to utilize Jordan Washington, because, a lot of times when you want to put a receiver or put a running back out there as a receiver, especially with somebody like that, just send him on a go. Just, either if a linebacker is going to go out there and run with him, he's probably not going to run with him. Or if you want to take a safety out or put a corner out there, all of a sudden you're creating a mismatch somewhere else. So there's so much that a guy like that can bring to your roster and just bring to any given play if he has that ability as a receiver. And Jonah mentioned, you're probably going to see a lot more of 2 running backs out there on the field at different points of the season. So there's certainly a big possibility that that's what some of that might look like. And he just has that ability, just that talent to stretch the field as a wide receiver as well.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you're talking about on defense, where you're just creating one-on-one matchups. Who gives you the bet? And then you talk about Jordan Washington versus Y, whoever you're facing. It's like, I'm taking Jordan Washington 8, 7, 9 times out of 10. And you look at Jonah the same way, and you look at the receivers same way. It's about, because you have all, like, when we talk about having all the talent in the cupboard, that's the whole point of it. Is that's why you stock the talent to where no matter who's in that position, whether it's Audric, Rashid, Jonah, doesn't matter, Adam Muhammad, because Adam, I think, is just as well of a pass catcher as well. I think he certainly can hold up in pass blocking, no doubt. So all those things you check, I think Jordan, the biggest area of improvement for Jordan will be pass blocking. But again, I think, like we're talking about, there's certain roles where maybe he's like a disguise where you just chip and go. You don't necessarily have to be that stand-up, hey, you need to buy Demond a couple extra seconds here type of block, where there's certain guys you'll use in certain roles. That's why, like you mentioned, you get 2 in every class, so you don't have to push one guy towards doing everything.
So I certainly like where we're going with that. And just as you were saying all that, something hit me where it's something Alex and I talked about the other day, where it's just reasons to be optimistic for the 2025 season. Everything we just said, especially regarding Jordan Washington and just running through all these names on offense, is a big reason for that, where there's so much talent on the offensive side of the ball, where, we like Giles Jackson, Jeremiah Hunter, just everybody who was part of that group last year. But this just feels different. A lot of it is because you have a more fully stocked offensive line, but being able to add somebody like Jordan Washington to the mix is such an exciting part of that, where you look at this running back room of Jonah, Adam, and Jordan now, and you say, all right, I see the vision. I see, what you were building for last year. And now that possibility of taking a big step forward is absolutely on the table. And, the more I look at this receiver group with Denzel, Omari Evans, Rashid Williams, Kevin Green, whoever else you want to throw out there as the young guy that, any everydayer out there might think, hey, this is my guy, whether it's Chris Lawson, Marcus Harris, Dejie Jose, the list goes on. There's a lot of talent there that is just waiting to break out. I didn't even mention a freshman All-American at tight end and Decker DeGraff and what that all could look like. So there's a lot to be excited about. And Jordan Washington, I don't want to say he's the piece that, ties everything together, but he's just an extra compliment that almost feels like the cherry on top in a certain sense. But Lars, there's a lot of other stuff we got to get to from Tuesday's practice. Lars, I mentioned it earlier, pulled out my handy dandy little notebook here. And there's one defensive front in particular that I wanted to point out, because I turned to our buddy Nick Lemkow and I said, man, this is a whole defensive line full of my guys that I've just, for one reason or another, I am super duper high on. It was Isaiah Ward, Taulealea, Omar Khan, Antario Thompson, and Deshaun Lynch. And I looked at this defensive line and I said, this is a lot of fun for a lot of different reasons, where the everydayers know from last season how I felt about Deshaun Lynch as an athlete, playing that 3-4 outside, especially now that he's playing that 3-4 outside linebacker, stand-up role again a little bit more. Really curious to see what he can do there. And Terry Thompson has shown that he's just going to be a powerful force to be reckoned with. I love what Omar Khan can bring. And in this sense where he's lined up as that nose tackle, just as a high floor run defender, I like what he can bring there. And he opens up lanes for Taulealea and Isaiah Ward on the other side to be the productive pass rushers that we know they can be. So I looked at that defensive front and I look at just the depth that front can bring. And we saw them get some pressure at different points today and open up lanes for blitzers, whether it was Alex McLaughlin or Paul Makell was doing it at different points of time, to Rashawn Clark as well. And I just say, I just really like what this defense can be under Ryan Walters and just all the different looks that it's going to throw at opponents.
Yeah, the fact that you can list a start, like, we'll just go starting 5 or just a 5-down line group, and you don't mention Simone Peppa, Logan Sagapalu, and Linus Davis, like a number of other guys. Like that's how good this room is. And then obviously, you throw Derpy on the edge there, maybe. Again, these are all luxuries that you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, that's why that line is so intriguing, because it's not like that's your go-to one line. And even if it was, it's not bad. That's pretty good. I'm intrigued as well. Like, because you look at Deshaun on one side, Isaiah on the other, and then Ty kind of just doing his own. I don't think doing his own thing, but just kind of like the fact that he can be so versatile, I think opens up so many different things. And then this is without Russell Davis, and you just go down the other list of guys that you could kind of supplement in for Lynch or for call it Omar Khan or whatever, and you just kind of look down that list and think like, man, like that is a healthy rotation where you can actually like go into a Big Ten game, let alone the non-conference. Like forget the non-conference. You go 3-0 in the non-conference again. Like we thought they would last season. I kind of had a hinting feeling Lubin might kick up something interesting. Now you go to the Palouse, so we'll see. But if you go 2-1, 3-0 in non-conference, that's one thing. But it's about the Big Ten. Like you built this roster for the Big Ten. You didn't build it to beat Kent State. What was it? What were the other strays that have caught ones recently?
I think Akron caught a stray.
Yeah,
that was my bad. My bad to Akron. My apologies.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was trying to think of ones where it's like East Tennessee State. Let's go there. But like one of those type of things where it's like, okay, like you don't really need it. But I think you just look down that list and think, okay, like this, you got this depth, you got this rotation that you can build along the defensive line week to week, where you can say we can game plan by opponent, not just hey, we got to figure out how to mix and match this puzzle board to see what we got.
So you talk about building a team for the Big Ten. Bringing in Omari Evans was critical to that, just because, hey, you need somebody you needed somebody at the position with experience. Why not go get somebody who probably wasn't utilized properly in Penn State's offense, bring him into a real passing offense? Let's be real about that. And he had a really nice day again today, man, where first off in one-on-ones, he beat Caleb Presley down the sideline for a 40-yard touchdown for DeMond Williams. The two of them were going at it right in front of us. It's really fun. It's just Omari, hey man, you can't guard me, all that sort of stuff, which is, it's always fun to just see that level of competition. And then a couple plays later in 7-on-7s, he takes a go ball down the other sideline in between Darian Clemens and I can't remember who the safety was on that side for another touchdown. And obviously none of that's in 11-on-11, right? So, there's a level of, okay, you gotta see it there, where we saw that last week in first practice, which was without pads. But I look at Omari Evans and it's the same conversation you and I have had a few times now. And it's just valuable veteran experience in this offense, where just the more I watch this, the more I say, once Denzel is back and healthy, with Rasheed Williams, with Kevin Green, Audric Harris, whoever else in that slot position, like I said a few minutes ago, I like where this passing offense is going. And Omari Evans is the kind of guy who, even if, let's say he ends up with the same exact stat line as Jeremiah Hunter this season, I feel that he will have come in and certainly done a job in terms of stretching the field and opening up this offense for everybody else around him.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's clear like that's the assignment. Like every time you mention, hey, he caught this ball for you, he did a go ball for. Well, yeah, like the joke of I think it was the Sean Payton commercial when he's reading the play out to him, and he's like, "What did he say?" It's like, "Get open." And like that, like Omar, just go, just get down there, because DeMond's gonna get it there. And it's not to say that you can't run other routes in the route tree, but it just is very clear like that's what they brought him in to do, in addition to being another veteran guy. And I think that is the other part of this that I do think can't go unnoticed, is where, we talked about, just briefly for 10 seconds here, like, had you had Jonte Cook, I don't think there's a different level of veteran presence that is now in that room. And I think you're starting to see that, where that's why he's having production 5 days into spring camp, where you're looking at it and saying, okay, maybe young guys we'll figure it out because he's got high potential. Like, no, you bet on the seniority, you bet on the veteran experience, because your offense is going to unlock him. And I think very clearly it's going to.
So I agree with you there. So we talked about the big plays. Let's flip the script here and talk about the turnovers, where Makell Esteen made a real nice play. Let's start with him, where I think he's pretty entrenched in the starting spot as of right now, where he made a real nice play where he just, I don't know if DeMond didn't see him or whatever it was from the angle we had. And I called it a user lurk play because I was having a conversation about Madden with somebody at the time. And he just did a really good job of just stepping in front. I don't think he took it all the way back to the house, but it's one of those things where I love what Ryan Walsh's defense is doing for these safeties, because the other guy who got an interception a few plays later was Vincent Holmes. That was on a ball that Kai Horton probably shouldn't have thrown, and just kind of tried to force it into a tight window. Vince Holmes did a good job of stepping in front of it. I wanted to pair those two guys together because this safety rotation is really interesting. And there's going to be somebody who, we talked about it in the winter transfer portal when Peyton Waters ends up at North Carolina, where somebody's going to be the odd man out. I feel like that's probably going to be the case again this spring. And Makell Esteen, again, might have that starting spot like entrenched right now, but I look at the guys behind him and I say, there's a lot of promise in this group.
Yeah, it kind of is the callback to when I asked Ryan Walters what he thinks about McLaughlin and CJ Christian. He's like, well, hey, like, just because those guys are the, high-priced transfers, it's like that doesn't mean they're guaranteed playing time. And I think I think I remember him singling out Makell in that same light, where it's, hey, like, Makell's a veteran. Makell's kind of been that guy where it's like he's just gonna be there and play all 12 or 13 games, and just like he's never gonna truly be that like wow, like Honey Badger. He's never gonna be the Cam Chancellor. Obviously, no offense to Makell, but just like he's not 6'5", 250. Like, there's a different level there. But my point is, like, he's always around the ball making plays, and he's always making an impact. And so I think that's the type of guy where no matter what coaching staff it is, he's just gonna find a way onto your defense one way or another. And I think that kind of being that veteran guy, especially like setting up the defense, Ryan Walters seems to be leaning towards him, being, hey, you know what you're doing back here, kind of set things up back here, and we'll still have you compete with the young guys. but I think it kind of just gives him another older shoulder to lean on in that sense.
Yeah, I do like where you're going with that. I'm just very curious to see where, is it going to be more of the over the top role for him? Because we've seen CJ Christian doing that a little bit more so than Makell so far this spring, where I like to harken back to the Indiana game, where Makell was really impressive, 12, 13 tackles, whatever it was, while mainly just playing in run support. So I'm curious to see if they might try to unlock him a little bit more in that role, or if those scripts flip. And we know CJ can be the big hitter when he's coming downhill, and just see if you just try to kind of flip that. And right now they're just seeing what they have, because that's a big part of spring practice, is just seeing what you have with everybody in the room. Because we haven't seen Alex McLaughlin take a whole bunch of first team reps just yet this spring. We've seen Ryland Dillard-Allen worked in at different points. We've seen Vince Holmes have his role changed a little bit. We've seen Paul Menke in the mix. And, it's like what we talked about with Rashawn Clark a few minutes ago. We haven't seen somebody who did come in, I know he's listed as an athlete, but he played a lot of safety. He hasn't played at that position at all yet this spring, where he's been just primarily in the nickel. So it's why I called it an abundance of riches when we're talking about that position. The question is who's going to rise above the rest. And right now I like where the transfers sit. I like where Ryland Dillard-Allen sits, and Vincent Holmes is certainly making a case to get into that mix as well.
Absolutely. Well, again, it's a good problem to have. Where, remember, we talked about this last year, where, man, you don't really have a ton of depth there. And now you got a lot of young depth, like a lot of freshmen, but you don't have a ton of spaced out depth. Now it seems like, cool, you got some upperclassmen, you got some middleclassmen, and then you got the freshmen coming in. It's a good, healthy mix of guys to see where they're at, and then you can reassess going into fall camp. But I think overall it's a healthy position.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank all of you who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.